Hi, everyone. It's Jonathan Hung. I'm here with one of my favorite portfolio
Aw,
companies and CEOs, Bassima.
thank you.
I love for her to tell us about her founder's journey and really like what she did to get here and how she was able to get ready for angel investing in the beginning of her company, SkinTe. Hi, Bassima. It's great to see
Hi,
you.
Jonathan. Great to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
thank you.
And you're one of my favorite
Um,
investors, just so you know.
Thank you. I'm glad we're able to kick this off. Our first
Yeah.
interview, my first video podcast with one of my portfolio companies. It's always great. I guess like the first question I'd love to ask you is like, you hear a lot of companies right now, especially in the consumer and CPG space, decide like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to go direct to consumer or try to get in traditional retail? I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about what you thought for Skin Tea. I know we should show the product. Here we go,
Oh,
Skin Tea,
yes.
right?
Cheers, everyone. Ooh, let
What's
me
this?
get it
Oh,
in there.
yeah, this is our favorite, my
Cheers.
favorite flavor.
Thank you. Mine too.
Yeah.
It's such a fantastic question. I can just kind of tell you my journey around this. When we launched SkinTea, we knew that not a lot of beverage companies launched in DTC first,
Mhm.
but we chose to do that. And the biggest reason is when you're able to launch on DTC, you own that consumer relationship. You can learn from the consumer, get their feedback, you get their emails, you start to develop a relationship, and you can learn from that. So for me, it was really important that when we first launched, we had a DTC presence that people could learn about us and really understand the brand and have that first brand connection be a premium experience that we could control. And of course, selling a beverage on DTC, we learned very quickly, can get very expensive, especially with shipping costs very early on and with the cost of acquisition early on. But I have no regrets for launching on DTC first.
Mhm.
And then what we did is we kind of did a two-pronged approach. So if you're going to launch on DTC first and you need some retail presence because it's such a huge opportunity for brand awareness, we positioned the brand in specific retailers. Like Erewhon was my first retailer ever. It was fantastic to launch with them and DTC, and that worked really well until we could get the right resources in place to launch in a bigger way at retail. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it's great. Yeah. And, just what do you think the journey's been of getting into an Irwan or a particular store? I mean, I love for you to tell the audience, like, it's not that easy. It's not
It's
just
not
getting
that
in.
easy.
It's
Yeah,
more one way to skin a cat. So I'd love to hear what you thought or what were some of the approaches you've been through.
Yeah, 100%. Well, for us, what I think really worked is when we launched SkinTea, we did it a little different than most beverages. We started in the beauty world. So we started going to trade shows. Indie Beauty Expo is a really well-known trade show in New York, London, LA, and Dallas. And we actually went there first and got written up. And then Erewhon actually reached out to me. They went literally to the contact us form on our website. So I'm
Mhm.
glad we had a website. And I almost fell off my chair when I saw the form because Erewhon's one of those such coveted places. And we were
Mhm.
so honored. And it was the beauty buyer that wanted to talk to me and said she thought we'd be
Mhm.
great for her audience. And then I met with her. And then the grocery buyers felt there would be a lot more traffic in that space. So our story is a little bit unique, but I think the learning from it is
Right.
you've got to tell the story. You got to get out there. You got to do the trade shows and the tastings. And retailers, there's nothing better than a retailer hearing about you and wanting you to come talk to them.
Yeah, wonderful. So we'd love to hear your story. For people who don't know about Skin Tea, and it's growing, everybody. Let me tell you, from where we were to where we are now, it's definitely in multiple more
Amazing.
channels. Yeah.
Thank you. Our story really is the essence of SkinTea. It starts with three women. We're three female founders, and we all like to say we all had major breakdowns that led to breakthroughs, and the breakthrough was SkinTea. But it is really an analogy for life when you think about it. So I just really quickly, I was working at Nike for 10 years, and towards
Mhm.
the last couple of years, I had stage 4 endometriosis. I had to get back surgery. I was having kind of my midlife health crisis and really thinking through my purpose in life. So I went to do my surgery. And believe it or not, my surgeon was the one who introduced me to collagen and kept saying, you should take collagen before, during, and after. So I was doing the bone broth and I was doing the collagen powders and the pills, and I was sick of all of it. But I loved how my skin was glowing, and people kept asking me if I'd gone to a spa. And I'm like, no, I actually just had back surgery. So I went to my naturopathic doctor's office, Dr. Amy Bader, who's a phenomenal naturopathic doctor with practices in Oregon and California.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting. She was newly divorced. She was going through her own journey. And
Mhm.
her best friend, Elizabeth, who's phenomenal, has the most tragic story. She had lost a daughter at 2.
Mhm.
And so the three of us kind of came together, really bonding over these major life transitions or breakdowns in our lives, and really thinking through, how do we evolve from that? And it was very intuitive. It was very synergistic with us. I had gone to Dr. Bader saying, do you have a better way for me to consume collagen? Because I'm sick of the powders. They're having to mix it all the time, forces me to have a certain drink all the time. I can only have so much bone broth,
Right.
and I get sick of taking pills. And so she said Elizabeth and her had been actually giving her patients recipes, because I wasn't the only one asking for this, where they combined these incredible super herbs and teas with unbelievable benefits and combined that with collagen. Then they were giving us the recipes. So of course I said, well, I'm not going to make it. It takes too long. Can I buy it from you?
Yeah, right.
And that led to us getting together and going, well, let's make this. We know a lot of people would probably want it. And we're just so honored. It means everything to us that women and men across the nation have loved it and embraced it. So we knew that we had hit a niche in the market.
Yeah, wonderful. And what do you think, because investors always want to ask us, like, what are you doing differently from your competitors, right? To be unique, because this is a functional beverage more than just, a beverage.
Yeah, I mean, if I may say so, I think we're bringing sexy to CPG, because these cans are very fashion forward and they're very chic. So the amount of attention we've gotten about our packaging has been unreal from buyers and consumers, to the point where consumers are like, these stripes make me so happy. So I think what we did a little differently is we knew that traditional CPG can be very boring, and it's usually like a lemon or a fruit in a white background or a dark background. And it got a little bit boring, and we said that it's okay for this to be a fashion statement, because it's an accessory. It's an accessory of how you carry yourself and your health and what it means to you. And we wanted everything from the taste to be light and refreshing to the packaging to bring you joy. And so I feel that has been done, differentiated us significantly from the market, because we pop off the shelves and we get so much attention. And then people want to match it to their outfits and their nails, and we become very Instagrammable. So I would say that's one thing we're doing differently. The other thing I would say is the story. I think a lot of brands out there, and I won't name one, but a competitor kind of was like, we're the number one X brand, and it's like, for us, we're more about the purpose of the brand, and we're more about what it does for you, less about, just, us and a positioning statement about what number we want to be in the world. So I think we're focusing a lot around purpose. We're focusing a lot on the health and wellness, and organically that starts to create a lot of buzz. And luckily that's what's been happening for us.
Wonderful. Let's switch gears and talk about funding, and fundraising.
My favorite topic.
I know, right? Because the marketing, the branding, building up the team, it's always great. But then, entrepreneurs and startup founders always have to deal with this issue of raising money. I actually am going through the same thing. I'm starting a startup too with one of my close friends. So I'd love to hear, how have you found your investors initially? Because it's different in the beginning when you're doing pre-seed, the seed, and then your Series A and above, because it's a totally different discussion.
Yeah, I just want to put it out there, because everyone always thinks I had it so easy and I've got these incredible investors, and I do. I have the best investors on the planet. It's really hard work. So for everybody out there, it's hard work, but it's worth it. And you grow on an emotional and spiritual level more than you ever have when you ask for money. I think the first one is, for me, I had to get over the part about asking for money. That was hard for me for some reason. You're taking money from people you love. So early on, it really was about the story. I focused on telling my story. And instead, I had kind of a technique where, instead of asking directly, this was really early on when we didn't even have this prototype. It used to be just to be a silver can.
Right.
And at the time, we really focused on the story and the dream, but we did it in a way that was also showed there's a realistic plan behind this. Like, we can do this. I think your passion early on is number one, and the founders and how they want to go about it. So I feel like if you are just bored while you're explaining how awesome your brand is, it's not going to work. You have to show the passion, the heart, the reason behind it, the why, but also show that you've done some work on the market and why you think this will work. So that was really important for us early on, and going to friends and family and people who know you as a person and believe in you. And then taking their money is hard, because every dollar I've taken sits on these shoulders, and I want to make them so happy, because it's like my own money. So for me, it's been a very deeply personal journey of those that believed early on and took the risk, that you want to reward them back. So, but I do think that's what matters, is telling your story. And also the team matters a lot. Who do you have around you? Because I think a startup is more than the founders. A startup is who you surround yourself with. And I've been very lucky, because we don't know the beverage industry. We're three women who didn't know the beverage industry, taking on a pretty male dominated industry.
Yeah.
And so for us to have that credibility was important. We've had people say to us, I will tell you early on, oh, the beverage industry is a monster. You might not want to be in that industry. And it was just so insulting. But the more that happened, the more we came together as women and said, we can do this. And just because, so many other industries are challenging too, you didn't see those entrepreneurs stop. So I think you have to have thick skin is my biggest learning when you're raising money early on. You have to believe more than anybody believes and just realize that 1,000 no's can't deter you, because it is actually how it works. And then you get that one yes and your whole life changes. So.
No, completely. Yeah. I agree with you. I'm hearing a lot of no's too. It's part of the process, and you can't be offended. It can't be offended because it's like, this is your baby. This company is your baby, right? And it's
that's right. No one's going to say my baby's ugly.
Yeah, it's right to say your baby's ugly. And unfortunately, sometimes my job as an investor is to do that. And it's not fun. It's not fun.
And you also learn that it's not personal. What I started learning over the journey is some people would want in and then they had a problem at home. Like I had someone who wanted in and then their husband was concerned or their wife. So, when you stop taking things personally, you realize there's different criteria for different investors. There's different risks they can take. So you just move on.
Absolutely.
But I say that, but the truth is it's really hard because I would at first take everything so personal.
Yeah. So through this, who do you think your ideal investor is? Someone who's hands-on, hands-off? Making great introductions. Necessarily like the dollar amount, but just, who do you think is what you in the beginning was better for you?
In the beginning. Okay. So in the very, very beginning, I feel like the ones that are less concerned about a spreadsheet and more concerned about the heart and the purpose. I want the ones that believe. You want the people on your team because it's hard to launch a startup.
Yeah.
So early on, we got incredible people from Sarah Blakely to Carly Claus to Leslie Blodgett to Brian Lee to you, who came very early on. And I think that was about heart. And those are the people that become kind of your family. Because a little bit later, I feel like it's all about the numbers and the spreadsheet and the margin, and that matters. But you want the people that have the passion with you to kind of grow it, because that's what it takes early on. And I think introductions are huge. I think a little bit of hands-on is good, but not overly hands-on either, because you're so in it every day. If you have an investor that's overly hands-on and that kind of doesn't have an idea of what the boundaries should be, that can get challenging as well. So I feel like I've been lucky because all my investors have really had the perfect mix for me so far. I've had a few who are kind of like, can we join every meeting and be a part of it to learn? And we just didn't go down that direction. But most of the time it's been introductions, it's been support, even emotional support. Being able to have a confidant on the side is really important for a founder.
No, it's great. Yeah, I completely agree with you. So then, what would you say, your biggest learning experience to date has been? What have you done differently, or would have stressed better initially?
Yeah.
Now, you've already raised your Series A. Now it's also about growth, right? And then getting to there is a little different, because I always tell people, my job is to get someone to their Series A. And then you move on. You graduate high school and you go to college, and
that's right.
I can only do so much for you then.
My biggest learning, and it's not fun to say, is you have to. And this is a quote that actually is online, so I won't say it's mine, but it's hire slowly and fire fast. And those that are with you early on aren't necessarily the ones that are going to be with you in the future. I was very different at Nike and Spanx. I cared about every employee for sure. But when it's your baby and someone comes in as early on and you don't continue with them, it's so deeply like they're your family and it's your heart's in it. So it's emotional. And what I had to learn very quickly is you have to separate the emotional from what you have to do for the brand. And I know it's the same in the corporate world, but it's harder, I believe, as a startup because of it's your baby. And those people came in at the riskiest time. So I think the team is everything. If it's all about the team, and you've got to get it straight. You've got to move forward. You've got to do what's right for the team and get the best people and figure out a way to get the best people join you when you're a high risk startup. That's the most important. So my learning would be to kind of let go of some of the emotional, stay human and stay empathic, but move on quickly, because I would actually stew in my head about it, and it affected me a lot.
Got it. No, great. Thank you, Bassima. Yeah. And speaking of that, how do you find the beverage game versus other consumer products? What would you say is like, so unique that you like that one lesson to take away?
The beverage game is tough. I feel like it's really, really tough because margins are tight. So you're being squeezed on the margins, and it's a crowded market, and you have to stand out. And at the same time, it's pretty cutthroat with retailers, and also investors, I think, have such high expectations on unicorns and margins being high, and the what you have to do to run a beverage company and all the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of the retail side is very challenging. Like if you had a different business that was primarily a DTC business, it comes with its own set of challenges, but it's different. You also have shipping costs. That said, high risk, high reward. It's also been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, because being able to offer a beverage that helps people from the inside out, that gives them joy. It never gets old for me to see it on the shelf, busting out there, standing out, and for people to tell me this is their self-care drink for, every single day. It gives me so much joy. But it is a very difficult industry. It's also cash intensive. You've got to be able to manage cash flow so well. So I feel the pressure is really high in this industry. I've heard this is one of the toughest industries to be in. I don't know all the industries to make that judgment, but I could say for me, this is probably one of the toughest I've experienced.
Great. And, as a CEO, what do you do to get to be more, ready for your day to day? Are there any books, publications, podcasts, or, that you tell your team to read or follow, or entrepreneurs that you think are important, through the journey?
Believe it or not, this is a bit different, but it's because we are SkinTe. Self-care is my number one, even more than reading. And reading is a form of self-care. But, for my team and I, it's about flexibility. It's about that hot bath at night, if that's what makes you happy. It's about getting a workout in. People always say, oh, go to a retreat. Not everyone has the luxury of going to a retreat. So for me, it's the little incremental self-care things you do every day. So for example, a lot of people are like, do you never sleep? And I'm like, I actually sleep. I take a magnesium supplement because that 8 hours is so important for my health to be focused the next day. It's the simplest things that no one wants to hear. Drinking 8 glasses of water, having my SkinTea. I don't have to be perfect. I eat chocolate every single day. But I think the key for me is incorporating little self-care, and flexibility is huge. A lot of my team works remotely. They have families, they have children. So being flexible as a CEO is everything. In terms of books, I am reading one that's great called Humor is Serious Business by Jennifer Aaker, who's an incredible Stanford professor. And I think what's brilliant about this book, I'm rereading it again, it is about the importance of humor in business. And Sarah Blakely, one of my investors, and Leslie have always kind of naturally embodied this. So that's the one thing that's inspiring right now, because, in the middle we have had the pandemic, and there's been so much seriousness and so much sadness. And I think being able to read some things that are a bit more lighter and about how you bring levity even to work is, I think, really critical. So for me, I would say that the number one thing is making sure that you allow self-care and that you allow people to do it on an incremental basis versus always having to wait for that 1 week vacation that not everybody can even take right now.
No, that's great. And I guess another question I'd love to get your perspective of is branding. Building a brand, right, is so much harder. For my past business, my family's gone into contract manufacturing, and it's like we were white labeling. We were doing other people's labels. And my dad always said pioneering is when you become a brand, right? And you have no idea if you're going to find, America, or starve along the way. I mean, there's no formulation. There's no step-by-step approach. And I love to hear how you've built the brand and what you think you need to do to further the brand going forward.
I think the brand has to start with a heart and soul. And I think that's how you build great brands. I was very lucky to have kind of real life MBAs through Nike and Spanx, both founders, unbelievably passionate and have heart and soul. So I think for us, Amy Elizabeth and I, started with, like I mentioned, these breakdowns to breakthroughs. We put our heart and soul into this. So I think you can't lose the essence of that. SkinTe is not a transaction. To us, SkinTe is deeply personal, and every consumer matters. Amy and Elizabeth play a huge role in customer service. Actually, I myself, Amy and Elizabeth, see every single email that comes from every single customer. Oh, wow. And people are always shocked to hear that. They do all the customer service. I'm copied on every single one. We have discussions about certain ones. We call the ones that have comments or feedback. We take every single comment very seriously. So I think that's how you build a brand. It's relationships. It's loving them, because we are honored. For a consumer to sit there and choose to spend their money on this can versus another one is a choice that they have to make. And I think for us, that's not taken lightly. So I think to build a real brand, you have to have that relationship. It has to be more than a transaction. It has to be about way more than an exit. And one of the things for us, for example, that's going to be launching soon is our purpose as a brand is beauty comes in all stripes, is our slogan around this. And the intent behind that is we think about these pillars of beauty, which range from diversity and inclusion to your character and to having self-love. Self-love is a huge important piece of beauty, because you have to start on the inside to see beauty in others. And so for us, that's our purpose. And being able to advance that conversation and give back is a huge part of how we want to build the brand and the community as well.
Wonderful. And I guess my last question is, like, if, all these entrepreneurs out there, these young founders, what advice would you give them, just starting off? Like, if you could, because like you've obviously have so many experience, and it's still the story's still being written, right? But
the story's still being written. All I can say is believe more than you've ever believed. You have to believe more than anyone believes. You're going to get knocked down, punched in the head. You're going to fall. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be pissed at yourself. You're going to step back up. But what keeps you going is that you believe in what you're doing. You're not going to be perfect. I have made so many mistakes, but I've learned from them. I felt so beaten down at times. I felt like, but then the next day, the sun rises and you're back at it, and it's because you believe. Yeah. And I feel like because if you believe on the inside, your resilience will come from that. Your courage will come from that. So that's my biggest advice. And I would also say, make sure it's the longest marathon. It is not a sprint. It's a marathon, and you have to be ready for that journey. And I'll never forget one of my amazing board members who Candace Crawford, she asked me when I first really wanted her to join. I'll never forget Candace asking me to go back to my business partners and really think about, are we ready for this journey? And it was probably the best advice, because she knows the beverage industry so well. And I think she was really testing our stamina. Like, are we ready? Are we in it? Go back and talk about it. And I came back and I said, we're all in. But I'll never forget that conversation, which really helped me understand that this isn't a joke. Like, this isn't just, oh, cool. We're, people see what's sexy, and people see what's in the press, and they see a result of how amazing these investors are and everything else. But the journey behind the scenes is, I think, the story that needs to be told more and more about what it really takes. And I have zero regrets. I think it's that roller coaster journey where I've grown the most spiritually and physically and emotionally, because I've had to focus on my health because of stress. So I feel like it's incredible. You just have to know that it's a marathon.
Wonderful. Great. And I love to answer any questions you have. I'm still the angel investor. When I first looked at Bassima as an investor, I just thought, like, oh, would I do it? Because I knew I run funds, and it really does matter. As an investor too, that you have to believe. Like, I think it's more art than science in the beginning as well.
100%.
And I can't focus on just numbers and just end results and like our end caps, how much we're paying for, or just the return rates, or fill rates, all that. That just comes in a mature business, not in the beginning.
And when you look at some of the greatest brands in the world that almost went bankrupt and recovered, like you have to believe, you have to keep going. And one question I do have for you that I'm very interested in is, when an entrepreneur has to come with bad news, like let's say they didn't meet their numbers for whatever reason, but they're still feeling like, we got this though. What advice do you have, as a board member and as a investor for that founder or entrepreneur when they have to give that news, but they don't want their investors to feel deflated, and they want them to know, like, look, I'm on it. It's just that right now we're hitting a small hurdle.
Yeah. I mean, and I've told you this before in the past. Yeah. I think the key is just communication, right? I mean, I've had it both ways, where it's just like someone's giving me so much information and it hasn't worked out, and that's okay. We expected it. We understand what's going on. And then there's like times where it's just like, oh, well, I have heard nothing, but then like, oh, they're raising again. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
Why are you raising? What is this money?
Really good
for?
Advice.
Like, give me like an understanding of it, because, it's not bad news. Know what's happening. It's not like we're Wall Street and we look at like quarterly earnings. It's not that we need day-to-day numbers or weekly numbers, but month to month or bi-weekly, it makes sense, because it'll help understand like where the money's going, Because
That's
I
great.
think in the beginning, it's all about cash flow, as you know.
Yes.
And like,
Yes.
we know that, like, for this business, like we've talked about how, like, there's can shortages this year.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's like, and that's the supply chain, and COVID's made a lot
Yeah.
of, wreck of everyone's supply chain. So listen, hey, we have to raise a little bit more money to get the cans in earlier. That's totally
Yeah.
fine, right? It makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes business sense. I always think what my father told me once as well is like the blind side. Like, you can always prepare for it. You always think about like what's going to happen, but then when it happens, then you have to be able to react. I always tell people, I want my founder and I to have an amazing in case of emergency contact.
Oh,
Right?
that's great.
Yeah.
You are like that. You're definitely like that. Yeah. And I really appreciate that feedback, because that was a learning for me too, because part of it as founders, and most founders maybe won't admit it, is you want to wait just a little bit to make something better and then come back with better news, because you never want to disappoint. And my learning too is that it's not about that. It's about keeping them engaged in the journey, and that they're there with you. They're your family. And I think that is one of those things where I think a lot of founders and entrepreneurs can fall into that trap of just waiting until the board meeting, or waiting until they have to present it, versus giving some feedback sooner. So I learned that too. And for example, sent a half-year report this year sooner than I had a board meeting, just to kind of give people a heads up. But I agree with you. I think that's a really important one, because it's not about making it perfect. It's about communication and not surprising. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Because we are already bought in. Like, we have already voted. And we are not like, could you, like, you would have to have a really bad investor who like is not supportive, after they've written the check. It just makes no sense, because, we're saying this is going to, it's like not all the other babies we picked, but this one is going to make it, right? Out of all the companies. This is going to pay for everything. And that's the mentality you have to have.
Yeah. And so another question I have is, when when you're evaluating a brand and you're looking at it, what is your criteria for success for an exit? And I know this is more about startup, but as you look at them and you go, okay, it's a beverage brand, for example, or another brand, what to you would be like, when you look forward to say that was a successful investment to you?
Yeah. It would be two different hats, right? Because like there's one hat where I am a fund manager now, and I have like my board is my LPs, right? And I have to account for them, and it's just like it's not always about just like listen, more is better, right? The overall number. I mean, you talk about IRRs or the MOICs, and that all sounds great, but from my perspective, a great outcome is just, hey, we're definitely worth more today than we were before when we started. And that just means so much, because like it's not necessarily like, oh, we have to get like 20x returns or 5x returns. I mean, it really just depends for me on how we've created something amazing together. This is like long lasting, right? That we didn't just create something for 2 years and we never heard of it again. Or it's a cash cow. Like, longevity is really the key. I think it's because like brands stay forever. It's weird when you think about like family businesses. Like I have a family business now, and like I don't know if it's going to get to the third generation. Because I don't have kids yet, but also because like it's not there. And it's like I heard this weird percentage where it's like only 0.6% make it to the third generation, whether it's a family business or corporation. Because when you think about it, like Mark Zuckerberg's kids, I doubt will run Facebook. I don't think Jeff Bezos' kids are going to run Amazon. And so it's really about like that the brand, the company survives more.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Me and you, whoever, or where we started.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that shows heart as well. Yeah.
No, great. I can't wait for the day when I see the billboard or see it like, oh, there it is. I go, we don't have the budget yet, but we're getting there, right? And
we're going to get to that budget, I'm telling you. Well, it's got to be on a billboard. It's too beautiful. It's just it's going to brighten everybody's day.
I know, exactly. And we'll see where it goes. Well, thank you so much, Bassima, for the time. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone's going to learn so much from you. Thank
you so much for having me. I'm honored. Thank you.